All right, what's good, everybody? Hope you all had a good weekend. And now today is Monday, so diving right back into the charts. Yesterday, I wasn't able to do the Sunday call because I was traveling and didn't get back to Dallas until a little late. So, going over our pairs, we'll start off what we had last week. So, where we were at last week, we were here when we did the analysis. We were sitting at this ascending channel. So I mentioned that I was looking for a break and a retest, and then we would sell it down to here. As you can see, this played out perfectly. This literally dropped for over 300 pips, and then it's still falling currently where we are now. So if you watched the Sunday video last week, you definitely could have taken advantage of this break and retest. And then, like I said, carried that down to that level of support. So that was good. And then after that, gold pretty much kind of consolidated for a little while. And then we got another drop on Thursday. That was good. And then on Friday, it was kind of a lot of consolidation as well, right? So starting from the top, let's see what we have for the week. On our weekly time frame, we can see that we had this bearish candle. So this is letting us know that there were some sellers inside of the market. We engulfed this previous bullish candle as well. So that lets us know, like I said, there are sellers inside of the market. Now on the daily time frame, same concept. We've been having more bigger bearish candles than we have been bullish. So we had this huge bearish candle that engulfed. Then these kind of retraced back to this level right here. Then we had another big bearish candle. And then Friday was, like I said, consolidation. And now today we have been forming, we had some lows and we had some highs formed, but we're still kind of forming this daily candle. Now let's go back to the daily. So daily still consolidation, and then going to the H4, gold has been in that weird consolidation, but overall we just got to trade what we see and not what we think. Lately, this impulse push, we had a correction, and then we're starting to get this continuation to the downside. You can see we forming lower low, lower high, lower low. So that's something that we want to pay attention to. And then also we can draw another trend line. So last week we had this trend line break and retest that told us we were going to sell, but now we can have this trend line at the bottom here as another potential target, because why? We had bounce here, you had a bounce here, and if price was to make its way back down here, we would like to evaluate price at that area, right? So that's something we want to pay attention to. And then also we have this trend line here that price has been respecting off of. So both of those areas are areas that we want to pay attention to going into this week, simply because price has been bouncing off of those areas in the past, and we want to pretty much box price in and react to it, right? So going down to H1, we can see that we've been forming these structures. So lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. So this is where things get interesting. So this little low here, let me just draw a line so y'all can see what I'm talking about. This low barely made a new low, so it's almost the same level. So counting this as a lower high point is kind of one of those things where you could count it as a lower high point, you may not count it as a lower high point, because the way that these lows are pretty much at the same level. So if you count it as a lower high point, then of course we could say that price broke structure here, the impulse, we could look for a correction before a continuation. But the way that this is forming, it gives that it's more so just this was like the same area, and this will be the structure to potentially go down. So that's something that I'm taking note of this morning. Just like I said, that level. And then that kind of goes hand in hand what we have on our smaller time frames as well. So let me just take these off. So that kind of goes hand in hand what we have on our smaller time frames. Smaller time frame, we can see we have this trend line. Every time we hit here, we bounce, we bounce, we bounce. So it's an indication that the price could potentially bounce from that area one more time, right? So on our 30-minute time frame, though, this is what I was mentioning, that we could have this as a breaker structure, impulse, correction, and then we would look for a continuation. So I'm gonna put a fib on here, And if we get some bullish price action in this area, currently where we at, so even at this little minor level of resistance slash support, if we get some bullish candlesticks, I'll be looking for a buy up as such to that negative 27. But if we only get, like if we continue to print bearish and bearish and bearish, I could definitely see this continue to go down to hit its structured TP of this negative 27 based off of this fib. So if we don't stop here, then I would like to see price go to that negative 27 TP, because just like last week, we had a minor breaker structure last week, which was here. I even talked about this in the Telegram chat. We had this minor breaker structure, and then we had a fib from point A to point B, but then the fib got disrespected. So same thing can happen here, because minor structure can always easily be invalidated. So knowing that this can still push down because of all of the aggressiveness from the sellers inside of the market currently. So if we look at like H4, a lot of seller momentum, correction, seller's momentum, another correction, and then we'll see if price stops here. But if not, then like I said, I'll be looking for price to continue on down to that negative 27 TP. So that's how I'm pretty much assessing gold right now. I always like to have both scenarios in my bag just so I'm prepared for it, so that I don't marry one bias. So if we get this respect and we get some bullish engulfings or bullish candlestick patterns, then I'll be looking for buys today, and that will be the move on gold. So ghost pattern, I'll just put something like this. But if we sell, I'm gonna put sales underneath here. All right, so that's what I'm looking for on the sales. But if not, then I'll be looking for a buy today on gold. And then on NASDAQ, last week we were here. This played out once again perfectly, right? So we were here, and I was looking for a price to pull back into this little level, and then we will buy it up because we were in an overall uptrend structure. And as you can see, this ghost pattern literally played out to the T for 280 points, and then even to the highest point was 480 points. So if you caught that, great job, because that was a beautiful break and retest of this level of resistance. And then price pushed up, and it also came back and respected that trend line. We even mentioned that we were looking for price to bounce off that trend line in that particular area, right? So currently where we are at, let's go to the weekly time frame. Weekly, last week we closed just a little bit bullish, nothing too crazy. Daily, we've been getting small doji candles, so nothing really like telling us that sellers are taking over. We're still pretty much in a buyer's environment. H4, pretty much the same thing. This is just a correction phase. So we had impulse, correction, continuation, correction, continuation. This is another correction, and then we could potentially be looking for another continuation as long as this higher low point is being maintained. So we can put our breaker structure line here, and then we can draw like a counter trend line here to see how far price is going to pretty much pull back before we give us a continuation, right? So this is another level of resistance that we respected. So I'm gonna just draw this over so that we can be mindful of that level of resistance. And then you can see we currently sitting in this zone. So this whole little level right here, we're sitting in this zone based off of the break of these highs. So this is another area that we could perceive potentially price bounce off of. And then we put a fib from point A to point B. Currently we at a 61.8. Now, when I have a major structure move like this, I kind of like to wait for this to get broken before I look to just buy off of this area, because this could pull back deeper. And since it's on major structure, I wouldn't want to have all of that drawdown. So like to the 78.6, that's still like 120 points. So I'll be looking for, transitions and structures on the minor structure before I take this buy. But overall, this looks good for another buy continuation. I would just, like I said, wait for something like this, and then you can continue to buy. If that doesn't happen, then anything under here, we look for sales. So just like gold, same thing. Under here, wait on break and retest for sales. Boom. So that'll be what I'll be looking for, and then I'll set an alert if this is crossing above that, so I can look for that break and that retest. So that's pretty much what I have on NAS to continue to bullish until we get in it like another reason on why price won't go bullish anymore. So once price breaks structure, then that tells us that we don't want to be bullish anymore. So until that happens, then continue to ride the bullish wave. Now US 30, last week we were here. I was saying to look for price to pull back into this little area, and then we would look for the buy. It pulled back just a little bit deeper. I originally had it pulling back to here, but it pulled back to this level, and then it gave us a push up. So even from there, we had a 400 plus point move, and then all the way to the highs of this negative 27, 700 points, and then negative 61.8 was literally 1100 points. So beautiful move on US 30 to take advantage of. This was a very clean setup. We talked about this trend line getting broken and retested, and we look for that to continue up. And just like how I've been explaining on the last couple pairs, if it broke underneath this, we would look for sales. But if it don't do that, then we continue to buy. And that's a perfect example of what happened on US 30. It never broke structure, so the buys were completely still valid, right? So going to the higher time frames, take a look. Weekly, still got bullish momentum. On our daily, we kind of had a rejection at this area, this little level of resistance that we sitting at, but nothing too crazy, like no engulfings or nothing like that. On H4, we've been flowing pretty well. We took out these highs. We made a new high last week, so that's good. On H1, we've been forming higher highs and higher lows. This is our last higher low point of this H1 structure here. So we can put our breaker structure line there. And then ultimately for my students, this would be our dot assignment. So our dots are still being maintained. And then going down to M30, you can see that we got this counter trend line. And then this actually looks really good for buys as such. So we have an impulse, we got a new fib, point A to point B, 78.6 retrace, and then it's already the 830 candle has already opened. So this definitely looks good for buys. The next opportunity will be if this breaks above this area and retest to go higher, and if we break underneath here, we will sell it off. So that's what I'm looking for on US 30 for this upcoming week. But like I said, this is one of those ones where it looks good. We just gotta wait on a little bit more confirmation before we take these buys. So let me just give y'all a ghost pattern really fast, and then that'll be the end of it. So yeah, something like this, and we carried it up to at least that high point right there. So that was what I'm looking for to start the morning. Hopefully this video was helpful. It's a little longer than typically what it is, but overall we went over a lot of things. So definitely be on the lookout for those things, and then I will see you all again next week on Let's Chart Sundays. So just make sure y'all tuning in, and make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button.